Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at Fleer basketball cards from 93-94 and 94-95. Fleer had an interesting time during this period where basketball was the only card set that they really seemed to take truly seriously. And so in 1993, for both baseball and for football, they went with a very minimalist design. And then in 1994, they also went with a minimalist design to kind of solve the problem of what they'd been facing in both of those sports, where they hadn't really done a good job of creating good card designs proper. So they wanted to go very minimalist and kind of address how those sports were, how they were kind of trending. And it was a pretty good move that they made in both those sports. But basketball was a very different affair. In basketball, they were doing very playful cards, and they were addressing kids, but they were also making cards that could stand up to an extent with Upper Deck. And the 92-93 set had been an unusually successful card set. They had made essentially an all-time card. So it was a really great card set they made. But then going into 1993, they wanted to do essentially what they were doing in the other sets. They wanted to go more minimalist. And it was a weird move for them to make. Now, the cards in football, not as much in baseball, but in football, they did look really good in both 93 and 94. But they were going for something very specific. Basketball was more of an area for kids, and that was partially because they were trying to bring in a new audience, but partially that was because in basketball, it was a much more playful environment. So when they made their minimalist cards, they still did it in a kind of a playful way. Here the cards have a simple white border with an image in the inside that's usually not very well selected, and then they do a subtractive text approach with basically spray paint on the outside. And even though it has a team color, it looks kind of shoddy. It looks thrown together. It looks kind of like a mess. And that was kind of what the result was with these cards. They don't look good. They look like an afterthought. And considering they had just had these incredible cards in 92-93, it was a huge transition. On the card back, the spray paint approach looked a little bit better for the text, but still not very good. These cards across the board, front and back, they just were not at all successful. And even in Series 2, the cards all looked the same, so the rookies looked the same as the veterans. The only positive that they had was they did have 3 subsets, and the first one was League Leaders. And here, even with the white frame, what they did with the background really helped. So they did kind of an airbrush approach where they had these diagonal lines that are technically silvers, what they went for, but at least it looked good. There was something of interest in it. It was very clean, very professional, and ironically, the background image almost looks like little strips as a result of how the card was designed, but it looks good. But the card back is what's really successful about these cards. Now, the card backs for the subsets had been a work in progress, we'll say, for the previous sets. Here, it actually looks really good because they have interest in it. And, okay, so you can't read the text. That's all right, because the card itself looks fantastic. Now, their award winners cards, here they used a gold approach for kind of the same thing, but they went with a big fan of design over the background, which was, it was okay, but it wasn't very good. But on the card back, this is a really fantastic card back for what they were doing. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Now, unfortunately, they also did their Provision cards designed in the same way as the main cards in the set. The previous Provision cards had their art up on the top, and then they had a band down at the bottom, and it was a really well-designed approach. Well, here, the art wasn't as good, and then they have the same subtractive spray paint text down there that it just makes this card feel a lot more patchy, a lot more sub-tier. So, not a highlight for the set, but that was it for the set. It was a very basic set. It was primarily just a bunch of not very well-designed player cards. But at this point, they were starting to lean pretty heavily into insert cards. So that was really where Fleer was putting all of their energy, and these inserts would be pretty good. I'm going to start off, however, with an insert redemption card. And this was a Series 1 insert where they did this because at this point we were still very excited about the rookies coming out. Some Series 1 sets would be released late enough that they could actually include rookies in them. Other ones were released early, and then they would give you a potential redemption card to get the rookie cards early. And so that thrill was a really big deal. And so here, that's exactly what it was. And the redemption was for the 11 players in the lottery. Now at this point, Toronto and Vancouver hadn't started their franchises, so there were still only 11 players in the lottery. but that's what it was. It was 11 players, and these cards came back exactly the same way as in the main set. Now, the images were different, but the card design was the same. So instead of a team color spray paint, they went with a gold spray paint. So that was a big improvement. And then they also have the actual lottery number on it, which I like that on these cards. And then on the card back, again, it's the same. They just use gold spray paint, and then it's numbered X out of 11. So that's the way that these cards were designed. But they do look better than the main cards in the set. They're just still not very good because the main cards in the set weren't very good. But like I said, this is really more about the inserts. And first off, we've got the career highlights. And this was the third and last year they would do this in Fleer for basketball. And Clyde Drexler was the player that they went with here. These cards have, again, the white border, but they actually do something really nice where they have a nice, it's kind of like a stipple design for the background image of the player. And then they have a cutout on the front. It's a very clean and crisp design. It looks really nice, especially with the gold foil text on the top and the bottom. So for me, this is a really good way for this card set to come out. And these cards, there were 12 cards in the set, but they did also have a wrapper redemption for 3 additional cards, for 15 total. And these also did come with the autographed cards with the embossed Fleer logo on it. Their All-Star cards, again, were really good. This time it's a vertical orientation. Now, the border here, they went with, I think it's a lavender. I think that's technically the color they went with, but it's a really good tone to go with. It's got enough vibrance to it, but enough elegance that it works on both sides of being flashy enough for kids and subdued enough for really mature audiences. So it's a great card in that way, and the gold foil, little bits of gold foil, some text here and there, the detailing around the logo, it's really well done to where these cards look like a very, very worthy heir to the 92-93 set. The cards also, they did something great where they have only the bottom half has a pattern that was put in over the background, and then on the top portion the background is the image, and that means that the player stands out on the bottom, and then you can see the player up on the top with the background. So the player actually does come out, but you still get some of the interest of the whole stadium as the card design works. And then when you flip it over on the card back, they use the same pattern for the card back. So the cards look great on the front and on the back. They also did an International Stars card set, and this also uses the same lavender color around the outside, and they have a kind of a segment of a map for picture behind the player. And I've always loved the international card sets because the NBA had something really interesting where, unlike the NFL where almost everything was coming from the US, in baseball a bit you get from, say, Venezuela or someplace like that. Here with the basketball, you get some players from some really interesting locations. Now, this was just before the big wave of European players hit the league. So we'd had a few players like Vlade Divac, Drazen Petrovic, Ronnie Cycli, a couple of European players, but we also had players like Akeem Olajuwon from Nigeria. We had Carlos Herrera here, and then Patrick Ewing coming from various locations that you really wouldn't think of. And so it was always fun to see the non-American players, the non-US players in these sets. So I love that they did that, and the cards do look really good. The Rookie Sensation cards are kind of a mixed bag for me because they have the gold, or I think technically it's like champagne color, for whatever that's worth, around the outside, and then you have an overdone image for the background, and then the player in front. Now, I've never really noticed the design on the inside. I think it's always been the border that's really kind of caught my eye. So these cards, I'm not going to say they're a failure at all because they do look nice. It's just I never take the time to look at it because the color pattern in the back is kind of that. It's more of a color pattern rather than a design. Then they have first-year phenoms, and these cards are, technically they have a border, but it's not really, that doesn't really quite fit. I've always really liked these cards because the image of the player is really good, and then I like the neon court design on the background. So that is, it's a really good combination between the two. I think that that's really successful, and it has a nice high-gloss quality to it that does read pretty well. But probably the most impressive insert set from all of these is Living Legends. And this is a smaller set. It's horizontal in orientation, has 2 shots of the player, and then the whole card back is chrome. It's just chrome. They do have some gold foil on it, but the chrome is a nice contrast to the cutout shots of the player. So it's a great combination of that with some pretty strong stars in it. So great cards here. Again, a small card set and kind of rare to encounter these cards, But this was one for me that I always really enjoyed over the years, trying to put all the pieces together to get this set complete. And on the card back, this is, Fleer every once in a while would do this where they'd have a very simple shot of a player and then they would just have the text, and they would have the two in a very bold format. And to me, this is one of the strongest cases of that. I think the card backs look great. Then they have the NBA Superstars, and to me this set, to me this has been more of an Ultra set rather than a Fleer. It actually did come in Fleer, but it felt like Ultra. I never felt like this belonged in Fleer. It just doesn't seem like it should be a Fleer card set, even though you look at some of the other insert sets, and they do have a relationship, but it's a high gloss. They have a whole bunch of images, 3 images and a 4th image, but it's really that band of the team color down the side. That's the big thing on these cards. They look fantastic. And they were common enough in packs that they were pretty easy to complete the set. So they're not too hard to come by, but they do look great. I love this whole card set. Then they have their Sharpshooters and their Towers of Power. And the Sharpshooters cards is interesting because it has a background shot of the player, all monochromatic, and then in front of that there's a squiggly line with the cutout shot of the player in front. And you don't really notice that, or at least I never really noticed that. To me, it's always about the background shot, and the background shot looks great, and so too does the logo, the Sharpshooters logo. I love that. And so the cutout shot of the player and the squiggle, to me, it's kind of like it doesn't ruin the card. It's kind of off on the side, and then it's the background that really carries on this card. Ironically, on the card back, now you can actually see the cutout shot of the player and the squiggly lines. Different shot, obviously, but it actually reads in the card back. And then lastly, Tower of Power this is a really impressive card set because it's a really clear shot of the player, and then the background is a wonderful cityscape, all vertically oriented. It's very exquisite, has the high gloss quality that makes these cards stand out really well. I think it's just a fantastic card, and it's always really carried with me. I love pursuing this card set. I love every time I see the cards. They are very, very nice looking. But that was 1993, or 93, 94. That was basically what they did for the whole run of it. And then in 1994, they were going to lean even further into inserts, so to the point where it was 1 per pack. I mean, they got carried away, and carried away in a good way, except you still had to get the main cards in the set. And unfortunately, while they did improve the cards, they didn't improve the card fronts enough for me to say that it is clearly an improvement. It's technically an improvement. So the text now is just text on the bottom. They still have the white border, the image, usually better images. The selection of the images was better, but they have the name of the player in the team color, and then they have a team color foil. That's the big interest. And to me, it almost makes it look cheaper, but what's more significant is this is a card design I always forget about. I wish I could forget about the 93, 94 cards. These ones, I do. Every time I stumble upon them and I go, oh yeah, right, I forgot about that. Even now, as I've been preparing this video, every time I look at it, I go, oh yeah, that's right, they did that. It's that kind of the quality where it's just very forgettable. And it was a good rookie year too, so you'd think that you'd want to remember Grant Hill or Jason Kidd. I don't remember these rookie cards. This is just this one weird year where the card design was so blah that it really kind of suffered. That being said, the card back is fantastic. It's basically the same card design as the previous year. Very, very similar, except here they have a black border, big benefit, a really strong glossy finish that I don't know if it is going to survive in packs over all these years, but if you did have them loose and was able to keep them loose, the high gloss on the card back looks great. But you have bold colors back there, you have a really good image. The way they did this card back, it looks fantastic for a Fleer card back. And so to me, ironically, I think that the card back's great, the card front's not. So if I spend all my time looking at the card backs, I'd say this is a really good set, but that's not the case. And it was Series 1, Series 2, all player cards. The rookies looked like the veterans. They didn't do any subsets. The only card other than the checklist that was of any note that wasn't a player card was their one tribute card to the upcoming Vancouver Grizzlies franchise. This is a horizontal card, looks really good, but that was it. That was the whole set. It was just all these boring player cards. And they also did another NBA lottery redemption card. This is for, just like in the previous year, it's for 11 cards of the first 11 selections in the draft with the same card designs, different images, but the same card designs as the regular cards in the set. Here they used only gold for the flame, and then they do have the draft number as well. And then over on the back, here they actually redesigned the back, which is, it's kind of sad in a way because that's the only part of the card design that I think really worked. And here they actually made it not as good as otherwise. But, still, it's a fun card to get. And so that was a fun little thing that they did. But this was all about the insert cards. This year was all about the inserts. And boy, did they have a lot. So in terms of filling all these packs with inserts, they had to come up with all sorts of crazy ideas, and that's kind of what they did. So some of these card insert sets are fantastic designs, and some of them just didn't really hit the mark. For us, it wasn't as much about seeing the actual inserts, because back in 1992-93, every time you got an insert card, it was a big deal. Here, there was nothing big about it. It was just like collecting the set. You were trying to get all these insert sets collected. And it was really only the one per box insert cards that you really paid attention to. So otherwise, some of these cards were fun to discover. Other ones, you just got out of the way. And starting off with the All-Star cards, this is a good heir to the previous 2 years of All-Star cards where it's not designed as flashy, it doesn't look as nice, but it's got a really great gimmick, which is the surface, which is a basketball surface. Now, Playoff would, shortly after this, they would start doing leather cards, which was always great to get that feel of the leather. Well, here, ironically, this has the feel of a basketball. The whole surface is designed to look like the leather on a basketball, but it actually feels kind of like it. There's kind of almost a not quite a sticky quality, but there's a particular feel that a new basketball has, and this card seems to have that feel. Now the card's thin, so it doesn't feel like it's actually leather, but it does have a feel kind of like a basketball, which I think is a great trait about these cards, so it's a lot of fun in that regard. The Rookie Sensation card, however, this is more of those, you got a whole bunch of insert cards and so you got to come up with a design. And Rookie Sensation cards were always kind of hit or miss in terms of how they came out. And for this particular year, it was like an explosion in front of an explosion. There was lots of color. The shots of the players, not too bad, but overall the cards, there was nothing interesting about them. So it did pretty well for catching the eyes of kids, but it was just another set that you collected. Now the all defensive team cards, these are really exquisite cards. I love these cards. They look fantastic. This is a monochromatic background with only the player in full color. They have some really nice silver foil on the card, which kind of accented it, and then printed onto the background are various words that are kind of sprinkled in that add a little bit of interest. But overall, the card just looks incredibly clean, incredibly elegant. I love this card front. The card back is, it's kind of like a flare card back. It's there, but it's kind of like the inverse of the main cards in the set, where in this case, I love the card front and I really don't like the card back, but that's all right because we don't spend a lot of time looking at the card backs, so it works perfectly here. They also have a very small set, which is their NBA award winners. And these cards have just 3 shots of the player, and then they have a color to a black fade, and that's basically all there is to the design. It does look really nice, but this is another one of those where you're just collecting them as you're going through the packs. In a very different way, the Career Achievements cards are very standout. This is one of the 2 etched foil cards in this set. And these cards, they have a really cool trick where they basically have done the entire player. The background is a shot of the face of the player in the etched foil technology. So as you move the card around, different parts of the player's face and the jersey, they come to life in different ways, which is a really cool effect that it has. Then they have their first year phenoms, and these cards are always forgettable for me. I mean, every time I look at them, I just kind of go, oh yeah, I kind of remember those, but there's nothing stand out about it. It's a shot of a player, and then it's the same shot of the player in 4 different squares along the outside in different colors, and there's kind of a tear mark and whatever. There's nothing interesting about it. It's just kind of there. It's one of the sets that we collected. That's about all there is to say about it. Luckily, the League Leaders cards are very different. Here, these are horizontal, and there's a dynamism to these cards that's great because there's this horizontal court that is the backdrop behind the player. And especially in the case of John Stockton here, where the image is a shot of him cutting, and then you have the Jazz logo, which is kind of tilted. Everything's really horizontal. But really, with all of these cards, the horizontal format of the court looks really good with the black band down at the bottom. It's a great card design overall. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Provision. So Provision started off as an insert set, and then it became a part of the subset of the main set, and then another subset, and here it was as an insert set again. But they also started off with a really good design, made it better, and then made it pretty mediocre. And then here, to me, this is a card, this has always kind of bothered me because I always was aware of Provision, but it wasn't until really the 94 football set that I really started to notice these cards, because they didn't look right. That was the thing. They just never looked right. And these are the same way. Here in basketball, they don't look right. They got rid of all of the design, which should have given the ability for the art to really carry, but the art isn't very good. And I think that's really the big problem with it. So unfortunately, there's nothing about these cards that is distinctive. It's not a good swan song for the Provision concept. Then they have the Superstars cards, which is the other etched foil card. And this is a fantastic card. This is like Mardi Gras, but the Las Vegas version of it. The colors are really bold. I love the tricks that they play with the etching. And they do it in a way so that you actually get like little jewels that pop up here and there on the card. The way that everything comes together, it's beautiful. And this is a card that the best way I can describe it is the player does not get in the way, that he doesn't ruin the card. You don't need the player on this card to be great. This is a gorgeous card, and that's really all that it comes down to. It's fantastic, and yeah. And then I also like the Team Leaders cards. Now this is an interesting set because Toronto and Vancouver had not yet joined the league, there were still 27 teams in the league, which means that you have the ability to take a 9-card sheet and put 3 players on each of the 9 cards, and you get the whole league. But instead of doing like conference and division breakdowns of different players, they actually did it in the way that a set is normally laid out, which is by name. So it starts with Atlanta, ends with Washington. So you get Atlanta, Boston, and Charlotte, or in this case, you get Houston, Indianapolis, and the LA Clippers. And so you can put these together on a sheet, and you get a whole miniature version of the whole league, which is a really cool thing that I've always really liked about the cards. Plus, they look really good. But it's also nice to get a couple of superstars on a card, which is a pretty common thing in this card set. So, great cards. Unfortunately, Total D was not very successful. So it's nice that they brought it back. The 92-93 set, Total D was one of the best cards, insert cards from the set. But in this case, it really wasn't a very good card design. You know, they tried it, but again, this is one of those insert cards that they put in for the sake of putting inserts into packs. Triple Threats also is a card it's kind of an overdone card. In this case, they just got too much stuff going on. They have 3 shots of the player. They have a bunch of neon courts kind of floating around. Everything kind of gets dragged together. There's nothing that really stands out. They do look pretty good on card pages. You just can't see any of the players. So it's good for pack filler, but not much else. The Young Lions cards, however, I love those cards, and I wish that these were rookie cards, because if they were, they'd be among the great rookie cards. Unfortunately, they're among the great sophomore cards. Nobody really talks about sophomore cards, but the whole design of the card is fantastic. It's got a really good shot of the player. It has a great shot of the lion. It has a great logo down below. The way that everything sets up on this card, it just looks fantastic. Then we have Sharpshooters and Towers of Power. And the Sharpshooter card is kind of everything runs together. It's got kind of an artistic version of a hoop behind, and that's about all there is to say about it. And then the Tower of Power card has an artistic, I don't know if it's like towers of coils or whatever. It's got some stuff behind it. Unfortunately, in both of these cards, there's just too much going on, and so they kind of run together. So again and again and again, these are cards that you complete in order to finish all the insert sets, because they keep coming up in packs. But that was the whole point of 94-95. It wasn't about doing individual things that were rare and great. They had a few of those, but for the most part, it's about getting more and more inserts, and it sold packs. These were fun to collect at the time. They really were, because every single pack there was something special, and you had so much to collect, which helped because the card set itself wasn't very good. But that's basically what they did with 93 and 94. Now 95 was the year when Fleer they'd try too hard, and it's kind of like when Mom learns all of the cool words and tries to use them to be cool, and you just go, just Don't. Just, it's not working. And that's what 95 was, which I'll look at a separate time. But for this year, this was, while in football and in baseball, kind of the years that they figured out how to make good cards. In basketball, these were the years where they forgot to make good cards, which is a very interesting interlude. But again, it was all about inserts, and that's what these were about. So I hope that you were able to follow along and keep up with all of the stuff that was going on, because there's a lot that went on. And definitely look out for my upcoming 95, 96, and 96, 97 Fleer set video. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check out my other videos. Thank you very much for watching.